Wow, what an intro. Hello, good morning. I'm sure this is going to be a really popular topic today. Botond will take us through one of his case studies whereby IP mesh and bonded cellular worked together to deliver a rather complex project on Lake Balaton in Hungary. So without further ado, Botond, over to you.
Thank you, JP, and welcome everyone from Budapest. Let me share my screen. So, on my screen, you can see this beautiful lake, Balaton, the largest lake in Central Europe. Its maximum length is almost 80 kilometers. Lake Balaton is for a 1-hour drive from our capital city, Budapest. Blue Ribbon Sail Race is a 155-kilometer-long sailing race around the lake, with hundreds of different boats, and it has been held every year since 1934. We were asked to prepare a POC, which shows the capabilities of a mesh network, providing internet connection to wireless cameras at boat races. These cameras were installed on boats, helicopters, and different places ashore. We will see how GovCom team of Broadcast Solutions Hungary prepared for this challenge, proved their engineering on the race day, and delivered the proper solution for this race. Now, let's start. Good planning starts with good engineering. As you can see, our goal was the full radio coverage of Lake Balaton. Let's see what our broadcast tools were. Planning tools like Silvus's link budget calculator are a swift knife for preparation. We use it to calculate the proper frequency, bandwidth, spatial streams, and the theoretically achievable maximum target distance. We will see it is also very important to adjust the environment properly. 25 kilometers is achievable here. You can see the target distance line. However, if we change from free space to maritime environment, there is a difference. In maritime environment, you can see we have the same parameters as in free space. However, 25 kilometers is not achievable on open water. It's also important to mention Silvus's built-in spectrum scanner. With this tool, you can set the best available frequencies for your broadcast and avoid interference from other signals. Actually, radio transmission over open water is the most challenging part of the whole project. Our next tools are different calculators. When you plan such long distances, never forget to use an Earth curve calculator. I can show you later how this works. Now, combining all these tools with Google Earth or Google Maps Pro, you will be almost prepared. Actually, Google Maps has a built-in, let's say, measure distance tool, which is really helpful for planning. After preparing everything in our office, next phase was the field tests. It was then when we realized how tough reality was comparing to our plan. Let me be as optimistic as Mr. Edison was. Well, we haven't failed. We just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Okay, well, it might not have been 10,000, but we spent 3 days on preparation. On day 1, we realized the difference between reality and our planning. In this picture, you can see our planning in Google Maps. According to our plan, even if we had line of sight, between our radio nodes, most of the radio waves would have been absorbed in the water. Still, the reality was that we could cover more than 33 kilometers. However, the link capacity wasn't good enough. On day 2, we planned to cover almost 50 kilometers with still line of sight between the radios. We achieved 46. However, the link capacity was so poor that sometimes we even lost connection between our radios. It's obvious, you may say, but not completely. We were able to send traffic between radio nodes kilometers from each other through the whole lake. But even close to the water, on a pier or the shore, if we had line of sight, we established connection between the radios, but it wasn't good enough. So we wanted to achieve better connection, which meant we had to find better spots. Because we were prepared. We knew that there are beautiful hills around this lake and different watchtowers. So we aimed at these places, though they were sometimes farther from the lake. And guess what? We succeeded. Now let's see the conclusion of this test. According to Silvus control panel, here is what we achieved. From Ashore lookout tower down to Fonyod. These are the pictures from the lookout tower and down to Fonyod Belvedere spot. We were able to cover more than 43 kilometers with a link capacity of almost 5 megabits. Actually, that is the maximum theoretical distance that can be achieved based on Silvus link budget calculator. Now, our main goal with this POC was to demonstrate that we could cover the whole lake with Silvus MESH network using just 6 radios ashore, 2 on boats, and 1 on a helicopter. Although we were not able to pre-test the helicopter or the boats, we knew that we were prepared. In this picture, you can see my very devoted colleague, Sandro Glanzer, who is not just an outstanding engineer, but look at this picture, he's also a brave climber. Now I will present several screenshots that prove that we succeeded. You can see that the whole lake was covered with Silvus mesh network. For example, the West Basin, helicopters, stations ashore, boats, or the east one, behind. And we use boats and those radio nodes ashore. At the end of the day, we were happy and proud to prove that our planning and pre-engineering provided by our GovCon team were correct and our proof of concept worked. But this is not the end of the story yet. You all know that today, cellular bonding solutions are the most common ways for wireless video transmissions. If you are on a budget, you may have just 1 SIM card. If you want better connection, you may have 2 or 4, even 8, and so on. However, even the best bonding solutions have a weak point. They depend on the existing infrastructure. Speaking from experience, you may all know what happens in places like stadium, concerts, events, crowded with people. Well, at last, what happened before these COVID times? It's the same situation in big forests, lakes, borders, where mobile network coverage is barely enough to send a text message. But if we build the mesh networks from our radios and, let's say, connect them to our cellular units, we can provide them additional network, which is the real game changer here. And that's what we came here for. On the race day, everything happened as we had expected. The race started, mobile networks went down, and there was no sufficient cellular connection, not even with an 8 SIM card bonding unit. Actually, there was no live feed from the wireless cameras. The show was boring while a fantastic boat race was going on. And it wasn't the fault of the bonding units. It was the fault of the network they relied on. So far, still we were happy and satisfied. We didn't want to risk jumping in a live broadcast. On the one hand, on-air could have ruined all our efforts we invested into this demo, not to mention our reputation. But on the other hand, if we succeed, we could win. You may guess what our choice was. We pushed the red button on Silvus's mesh network, and it came alive across the whole lake. On this picture, you can see the additional bandwidth provided by Silvus bonding units. On the other pictures, we could monitor also the airtime, the data rate, the signal noise ratio between the nodes, even the modulation schemes used by the Silvus radios were visible. M4 Sport channel was ready to broadcast beautiful live pictures from the water. You can see them here. One of my favorite is the helicopter carrying or mounted Silvus radio that saved the show. Now let me show you how our solution worked, because that's not the whole story. Our headquarters was at Balaton here. It was situated near the National Broadcaster's obi-van. We prepared a fiber optics-based internet connection here. So, Silvus radios operate as a layer 2 switch without cables. They also formed a decentralized mesh network. When we connected the internet at the headquarters to one of our radios, all nodes in the mesh network received the same connection. For example, when I took this screenshot, the helicopter was at the western part of Lake Balaton and received an internet connection from the headquarters. The routing went from headquarters to headquarters 2 via Tihany, Balaton-Bograd, Fonyod, and reached the helicopter. We covered 42 kilometers with a link capacity of almost 7 megabits through these nodes. It's so simple and so nice. Let's take a look at this fantastic control panel that Silvus has. You can see your radios placed on Google Maps. You can also see the actual signal to noise ratio between them. And finally, you can highlight the routing of the packets through the whole mesh network. Come on, isn't it fantastic? Finally, we learned some lessons that I think are worth to share. After we proved the concept about the boundaries of bonding cellular networks and solutions, we also found a way to break these boundaries with a mesh network formed by our Silvus MIMO radios. We understood that these radios are not necessarily the replacements of existing bonding cellular devices. They are rather the excellent tool to extend those boundaries of wireless connection provided the full cellular network. And it doesn't matter if it's a 3 or 4G or even the upcoming 5G networks. Together, these technologies are really unbeatable. Our job is to find out and provide the best broadcast solutions for any situation, not just in Hungary, but all over the world. That is engineering, that is our mission, and our passion too. Thank you for your attention. Now, back to JP.
Yeah, thank you, Botond. I think that's a really great representation of the relationship with IP mesh and bonded cellular, and certainly not the only application I can think of. If we look at marathons and cycle races, right, where the first mile and the last mile is always really congested, to have the mesh bringing capacity to the bonded cellular would be amazing. So right, we are looking at taking some questions now. The first one that I've got here is, what frequencies did you guys use and what are the frequencies available on IP mesh?
We used the S-band, but finding the right frequency needs a spectrum scan before, and then we have different steps to decide which exact frequency to use. For example, here we used 2353. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's quite an important point to make here, that this is not a Wi-Fi IP mesh at all. This is not the standard 802.11 systems that IP mesh systems that you see. What makes the Silvus radio different to that of these Wi-Fi ones, Helga?
Oh, yeah, to also cover the second part of the last question, you have a lot of frequency choice from the manufacturer. There are a lot of frequency modules to choose from, ranging from 600 megahertz to around 6 gigahertz. You can also have dual band combinations of those modules. And so you can go in places in the spectrum that are not congested or crowded, but you may also choose to go to an unlicensed band if necessary, for example, while traveling. With those radios, you are fully independent from infrastructure. So for example, in Wi-Fi, you typically have a central route, but those radios are all equal and they will form an autonomous network. That means even if you take one part out, the rest will continue to work. And there's a lot of technology baked in that is not yet available in Wi-Fi's, especially, for example, the waveforms are also optimized for a lot of different environments.
Thank you, Helga. Yeah, so I think in summary as well, the Silvus mesh radios is really optimized for a mobile application, right? And I think that's where it's coming into itself. It's also got multiple carriers, I believe. So multi-path reflections is actually works well with this technology, non-line of sight applications.
Yes, definitely. So it builds upon COFDM abilities and enhances on them by combining several technologies. So yes, it is very good at dealing with multipath situations. So you will be able to add those reflections for increased gain and transmission and also reliability. And it's definitely built for mobile use. Whoever has seen the last session, so it comes from a military background, which is of course a highly mobile scenario. But we also see it more and more in use for temporary fixed links. If you need point-to-point link for a given time, there's also something you can do. But anyhow, it is really made to perform under very different conditions and to make the best out of it. And it's also built just by itself. So typically it does not require intervention from the user. Of course, if you want to, you can always tweak a little bit and even get a bit more out of it, but it's thought, planned and constructed to just run on its own.
Brilliant. And the last question I have here is the unit waterproof?
Excuse me?
As they are.
Are the IP mesh nodes, are they waterproof? We were seeing them on Lake Balaton, but what sort of protection has the mesh nodes got?
Yeah, so the current version is IP68 grade. That means you can even put them 1 meter underwater for a certain time. And it's really made to withstand rough environments, rain, snow, whatever you can imagine.
Great. Last thing for me, the Silvus mesh comes with a clip-on battery, effectively. How long will this battery last in a standard broadcast?
So this battery on the handheld will give you 8 to 12 hours, depending on how much the radio has to transmit, or maybe you even choose to have accessories powered by this one battery. But you can also use external power. So For example, you may add a bigger battery, or you can just use a car battery, or you may have power suitcases with multiple batteries, or you can even connect them to, let's say, DC power available maybe on a boat. Or of course, you can also have AC adapters, so you can run them like forever.
Let me share my experiences here just for a comment, because we had experiences during the race day. We started at 7 a.m. and the last batteries last almost 8 p.m., which is incredible because it weren't just in standby, they were broadcasting, and the battery lifetime is unbelievable. That's also an advantage of the Silvus radios.
Brilliant. I think we've got time for one last question. In my experience with IP mesh, the most important factor is getting data, and no matter at what the cost. How does the modulation scheme work when you've got a tough RF environment or you've got a little bit more signal to noise ratio? I think you start off at a high modulation. Does it ramp down? Does it just cut off like a digital system? How does this transition between bit rates work?
So inside a radio, there's like a modulation table. That is a large collection of possible combinations of modulation, guard interval, and some other things. And the radio automatically chooses the best one. So it, of course, tries to get the highest modulation possible. And if it sees a problem there, it will switch one gear down. So typically it's, you don't just drop off the cliff, so you just go one step down. Yeah, and it's constantly monitoring the network. It is monitoring the quality of the links. And if the link quality is decreasing, it will switch to a more robust modulation. And what is important to mention is that's actually valid for every link. So if you have a 5 radio network, each link between those may actually run on a different modulation, depending on what's possible.
Let me share just for 1 second my screen showing this modulation screen because it's really exciting. Actually, it's not public, but now I will share to you that this is how the modulation schemes change from a radio during hours. It's very exciting and you can see all. Thank you. I just wanted to add this. I think it's nice for
the Botond, you're right, it is exciting, especially if you're looking at news applications where getting the data is the most important thing no matter what. And I think that's probably where the military history of Silvus comes in. Data is the most important, right? And especially in these times where we have situations on breaking news whereby the police or the government's forced to switch off the cellular networks for a period of time for if it's a terrorism threat or whatever, to have a hybrid IP mesh and bonded cellular solution is a great way to mitigate either congested networks or when they're switching networks off. And then to have the added ability to go even further and your system will automatically adjust its modulations to constantly give you pictures is brilliant. Okay, guys, I think we're out of time, but Botond, Helga, Peter, thank you very much. I hope everyone's learned a lot today.
Thank you for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you.